The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the small, secluded town of Willowbrook. I stood in the dimly lit chapel, my hands trembling as I clutched the hem of my dress. The words I had just spoken echoed in the silence, hanging heavy in the air like a storm about to break. "I'm pregnant," I whispered, my voice barely audible. The Reverend Father, a man I had trusted, respected, and revered, stared at me with a mixture of shock and denial. His eyes, once filled with warmth, now bore into mine with an icy chill. "No one will believe you," he said, his voice low and steady, as if he were delivering a sermon. "You're just a confused young woman. This is a test of faith, not a truth to be spoken." My heart sank as I realized the gravity of his words. He was right, no one would believe me. The Reverend Father was a pillar of the community, a man of God, and I was just a girl. But I knew the truth, and it burned within me like a fire I couldn't extinguish. The days that followed were a blur of whispered rumors and sidelong glances. The townsfolk, who had once greeted me with smiles, now avoided my gaze. I could feel their judgment, their silent accusations. "She's lying," they said. "How could she accuse such a holy man?" Even my own family turned their backs on me, their disbelief cutting deeper than any knife. My mother, a devout woman, refused to speak to me, and my father's disappointment was etched into every line of his face. I sought solace in the chapel, kneeling before the altar, my hands clasped in prayer. But even there, I felt no peace. The Reverend Father's sermons, once a source of comfort, now felt like a cruel mockery. He spoke of sin and redemption, his voice booming through the sanctuary, but his words rang hollow in my ears. I knew the truth, and it was a burden I could no longer bear alone. The fragments of my memories. I remember the late-night confessions, the way the Reverend Father's hand would linger on my shoulder a little too long. I remember the way he would isolate me, telling me I was special, chosen. And then, one day, I found it, a small, leather-bound diary hidden in the back of my closet. The pages were filled with my own handwriting, a chronicle of the events that had led to this moment. I had written everything down, every touch, every word, every moment of doubt and fear. As I read through the entries, the truth became undeniable. This was my proof, my lifeline. But would it be enough to convince the town? Armed with the diary, I confronted the Reverend Father in the chapel. His face paled as I held it up, my hand steady for the first time in weeks. "You can't deny this," I said, my voice strong and clear. "It's all here. Every word, every touch. The truth will come out." For a moment, he said nothing, his eyes fixed on the diary. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. "No one will believe you," he said again, his voice dripping with condescension. "You're just a girl with a wild imagination. Burn that diary, and we can put this behind us." But I refused to back down. This was my truth, and I would not let him silence me. As the days passed, I began to lose hope. The town's disbelief was a wall I couldn't break through, and the Reverend Father's influence was too strong. But then, something unexpected happened. Sarah, the town's midwife, approached me one evening as I sat by the river, my thoughts heavy with despair. "I believe you," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I've seen the signs, the way he looks at you. You're not alone in this." Her words were a lifeline, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of strength. With Sarah's support, I began to gather evidence. She helped me document my symptoms, the timeline of events, and the inconsistencies in the Reverend Father's behavior. But as we walked, I could feel the storm brewing. The Reverend Father was not a man to be crossed, and he would stop at nothing to protect his reputation. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard a noise outside my window. My heart raced as I peered into the darkness, but there was nothing there. Still, the feeling of being watched lingered, a constant reminder of the danger I was in. The breaking point came during a Sunday sermon. The Reverend Father stood at the pulpit, his voice booming as he spoke of sin and temptation. But then, his eyes locked onto mine, and his words took on a new meaning. There are those among us who would spread lies, he said, his gaze never wavering. But the truth will always prevail. I felt the weight of the entire congregation's eyes on me, their judgment palpable. But I refused to look away. This was my truth, and I would not let him silence me. Sarah's support gave me the courage to seek out others who might believe me. I approached Mrs. Thompson, the town school teacher, a woman known for her sharp mind and unwavering sense of justice. At first, she was skeptical, but as I shared my story and showed her the diary, her expression softened. "I'll help you," she said finally. "But this won't be easy. The Reverend Father has a lot of influence in this town." Her words were a reminder of the uphill battle I faced, but I was determined to see it through. With Sarah and Mrs. Thompson by my side, we began to formulate a plan. We knew we needed more evidence, more witnesses, if we were to have any chance of exposing the truth. But every step forward felt like a battle, and the Reverend Father's influence loomed over us like a dark cloud. One evening, as we sat in Mrs. Thompson's parlor, I felt a surge of determination. "We can't let him win," I said, my voice steady. "We have to keep fighting." Our first victory came in the form of a letter. Mrs. Thompson had reached out to an old friend, a journalist from the city, who agreed to look into the story. It was a small step, but it was a step forward. For the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. But as we celebrated, I couldn't shake the feeling that the Reverend Father was watching, waiting for his moment to strike. The threat came in the form of a note, slipped under my door one night. "Stop now, or you'll regret it," it read, the words scrawled in a shaky hand. My heart raced as I read it, but I refused to be intimidated. "This changes nothing," I said, crumpling the note in my hand. "We keep going." Our next breakthrough came when we found another witness, a young girl named Emily, who had also been a victim of the Reverend Father's manipulation. Her story mirrored mine, and her courage gave me strength. Together, we began to build a case, piece by piece, against the man who had betrayed our trust. But as we gathered evidence, the resistance grew. The Reverend Father's supporters rallied around him, their loyalty unwavering. They accused us of lying, of trying to destroy the church. The battle lines were drawn, and the town was divided. The turning point came when the journalist arrived in town. His presence was a spark, igniting a fire that could not be extinguished. He interviewed us, listened to our stories, and began to piece together the truth. For the first time, I felt like we might actually have a chance. The journalist's article was published in the city paper, and the truth began to spread. The Reverend Father's lies were exposed, and the town was forced to confront the reality of what had happened. But the battle was far from over. The backlash was swift and brutal. The Reverend Father's supporters lashed out, their anger directed at us. We were ostracized, threatened, and even physically attacked. But we refused to back down. The trial was a grueling ordeal. The Reverend Father's defense was strong, and his supporters filled the courtroom, their presence a constant reminder of the power he still held. But we had the truth on our side, and we fought with everything we had. The verdict came after days of deliberation. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the decision. "Guilty," he said, his voice ringing out. It was a victory, but it came at a cost. The aftermath was a mix of relief and pain. The Reverend Father was sentenced, but the scars he left behind would never fully heal. We had won, but the battle had changed us forever. Healing was a slow process. The town was divided, and trust was hard to rebuild. But with time, we began to find peace. And through it all, I held on to the truth, knowing that it had set us free. Come out into the light. Now, it was time to embrace that light, and to move forward with truth as our guide. The healing process was slow, but it was also steady. We had faced the storm, and we were coming out stronger on the other side. It was a reminder that healing takes time, but it is always possible. The new strength we had found was a testament to the power of the human spirit. We had faced the worst, and we had survived. Now, it was time to embrace that strength, and to move forward with courage. The new chapter of our lives was just beginning. We had faced the storm, and we had come out stronger on the other side. Now, it was time to write a new story, one filled with hope, healing, and truth. This concludes the story. Each section builds on the previous one, creating a narrative of struggle, resilience, and ultimately, triumph. The story explores themes of truth, justice, and the power of community, culminating in a hopeful and empowering conclusion. Don't miss this inspiring story of hope, healing, and justice. Like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us of the importance of standing up for what's right.